Hello, I'm Rina Diptianabil, aka Mummy Imperfect, and you're listening to the Sisterhood of Mummy Imperfect. And I'm so excited to be doing this episode. It actually feels like a while since I've actually sat and recorded. I've just come back from a holiday in Ghana. I'm just a bit like all over the place, but I am very excited about this and I'm just getting back in the swing of things. So let me just continue with my intro. This Sisterhood of Mummy Imperfect is a podcast where each and every week I explore the wonderful world of womanhood. And it's a place where you get your weekly dose of unfiltered girl chat. It's a place where we celebrate those women who are game changers. And I would say that today's guest is definitely a game changer. I've been reading her beauty columns for years. I've recently finished reading her new book, Ugly. It's award winning journalist, broadcaster, brand consultant, and author Anita Bhagwandas. Hello, Anita.
Hi, how are you doing?
I am good. Welcome to the podcast. And
Thank you.
I just want to say, first of all, well done on the book. It's kind of blown my mind a little bit, to be honest with you. Now, I do want to talk about the themes in the book, but first of all, you have worked in the beauty industry for years. So why have you written a book called Ugly?
Yeah,
Mm.
it's a long story, but I have worked in the beauty industry for years, and I wrote the book because ever since I was a really little, like a young girl and a child, I had a strong sense of feeling ugly, and that sense was one of the things that actually eventually drove me to want to, to become obsessed with beauty products and then to eventually have a whole career in beauty. So yeah, there's actually a really strong link, which is interesting.
I mean, the first line in your book is Anita Bhagwandas is really ugly. Now, that how much did that affect you and who said that and when?
Yeah, so that was a comment that was left on a digital piece that I wrote, which it was a column, and we did it every week, and I was always pictured alongside my two colleagues who were white, and I guess you'd say sort of conventionally attractive, and it would be the three of us would be pictured, and we'd try different trends. And when that column went online, someone commented saying Anita Bhagwandas is really ugly, and it shouldn't really have affected me. There are trolls out there. These things happen. I know that as a woman of color in sort of like the public eye, I know that. But it did really stay with me, and I couldn't really shake it. And I just felt that sense. It felt like such a strong word, and it felt like someone was saying what I thought about myself, but openly and publicly. And I just kept thinking about that word and the power that it holds and everything that ugly encompasses, and that's sort of where the book was born.
I mean, that word, you're right. It's a very strong word, and I feel uncomfortable about it. Even like the title of the book made me feel a bit like, oh, I don't use that word. And I have been on the receiving end of that word, myself. And if my kids ever say things like, "Oh, that's ugly, she's ugly," I'm like, "No, no, no, no." The only thing that can be ugly is the way that your attitude. Really, frankly, I personally think that the ugliness is something that's inside, you know, and that's the worst thing that you can be. But that word, when people use it, I feel like it is like I'm not. It's kind of a bit like who has the audacity to actually use that word firstly. I don't know like who is so perfect who can use that. Anyway, as you can see, I'm very passionate about eliminating that word from normal vocabulary. And but yes, for your book, the strong title, and you've done so much research into this, haven't you? Like the amount of research put into your book. How long did it take you to write it?
From start to finish, it's been about 2 years. So yeah, it's taken me a while, definitely. And I wanted to make sure that it was really well researched, and um, just that all of those things were concrete. And yeah, I think what makes the book maybe a little bit different to sort of books that have gone before in this area is that it does come at things from a sort of historical place, because so often we're told that, you know, things exist, everything from, I don't know, being fat shamed, or, colorism, or like all of these big topics exist, and we don't know where they started. We don't know where they've come from. All we know is that we feel fat, and we feel like our skin is too dark, or all of these different things, and we don't know where they came from and why they exist and who benefits from them existing. And that was what I really wanted to unpick, because I think coming at it that way for me, because I'd tried everything, I'd had therapy and, I'd done everything, and I still couldn't shift that feeling of ugly. Coming at it from this perspective made me understand it more, but also feel angry and at the sense of injustice and the time that I personally had lost from feeling ugly.
Yeah. And I actually feel that women are losing years. Like
Yeah.
most women are losing years where they're gonna look back when they're like 80 and be like, "What was I doing? Like, look at me," you know? So I strongly believe in that, but I've come to this place after quite some time myself, you know? That whole thing of like, um, growing up and feeling ugly though, like, do you think it was because, like you said in the book, you know, you were a brown girl, plus size, dark skin, in an environment where people didn't look like you. Did that make it worse?
Yeah, absolutely. I think our environments have a huge impact. Um, I was lucky that my family are very supportive, and I did, that I never had any colorism issues within my immediate family, which I know a lot of people do have. And that's really hard to then have your sort of like immediate, your parents or your siblings or whoever sort of say that you're not okay for some reason. I was lucky I didn't have that, but everything else around me said that I didn't fit in and that I was ugly and that I was othered for so many different reasons. And that, that goes, that extends from comments people make. And I did give an example of that in the book where somebody made a comment to me at a party, an adult sort of said I was too big to wear a princess outfit, and I had to wear something else instead. It was a fancy dress party, and
And you were like
that goes.
4 years old or something,
Yeah,
right?
it was when I was 4. It was the first time I'd ever been made to feel like I wasn't okay for some reason due to my parents. Um, and so yeah, sort of when things like that happened, or even just from the books I was reading, or the TV I was watching, there was just no representation. And that just carried on and carried on and carried on throughout my sort of teenage years, and when everything around you is saying that you don't fit in, you do believe that, because you don't have the evidence to prove otherwise.
Mm. I mean, I can relate to that in some ways. Like I actually grew up a lot around a lot of South Asian people, and like a lot of them were Punjabi, North Indians, like my friends as well. And you know, there is that obsession with fair skin, as you know, within the South Asian culture and other cultures as well. But, like, a lot of North Indians are actually fair skinned, and then obviously if you're North Indian and you're not, it's like, what is wrong with you? Like, where have you come from? What, you know, you don't look so good because you're darker. And, I did feel like that, like, a lot of my friends, that I'm still friends with today, beautiful girls, but they're people who in my mind, I was like, "Oh, they're pretty," and I actually went through a phase of, "They're not gonna be my friend because they're too pretty," and looked at it that way and always felt like I was the kind of, you know, like the wingman, you know, like, "Oh, they're good, all the boys are gonna like them," and they did actually, you know, so I can relate to that, but it really affects us, doesn't it? Like, when did you stop feeling like that? Like, othered and, you know, not happy with yourself, basically?
Yeah, I don't know if there was one definitive moment, but I think it's been a gradual process. And things like therapy do, those things do help, and I definitely would advise those things. Um, yeah, it did affect me for a really, really long time. I think it's probably maybe sort of in my earlier 30s as things started to change. I think as I started to read more about, yeah, all the stuff, I sort of talk about in the book, all the things about, where beauty standards come from, who creates them, why they exist, all the sort of systems of oppression that exist to keep them in place, whether that's classism, whether that's racism, whether it's, sexism, whatever it happens to be. And I, yeah, that was it, just sort of started to gradually unpick. And then when I came to sit down and when I had the idea for the book and I put it all down on paper, I was like, wow, no, there's something here. This is the this. It felt like the missing piece. And then as I did the research, I was like, this feels like the missing piece.
I mean, I find it so fascinating, the fact that we haven't invented these standards, like they've been going for ages, and it was fascinating, the historical stuff of like what people have done to themselves over years, um to look good, and things that are quite damaging, like obviously we're still doing some of those damaging things, aren't we? But then one thing I realized and I was thinking about is that there's this thing in all like living things, let's say, to look good. Like even a flower wants to look good, right? You know, to attract bees or whatever like that. And you know, when you watch all these nature programs, it's like there are peacocks like being all flamboyant and whatever. It's a thing, and we have this thing where we want to groom ourselves and look good. But where do you think that line is that crosses into kind of uh
Yeah.
that territory where it's not so good?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it comes back to like what good is, and that is the beauty standard. So that is, we could, in an ideal world, we would all look good as we are without anything, without any makeup, without any, without anything else. So when those things are put on top, that's when I think we need to look at things and deconstruct them and just be able to know who is making those decisions actually, so that we can almost take ownership of what looking good is for us and sort of create our almost like creating our own beauty rules, which is something I talk about in the book.
Mm.
But I think it comes back to the definition of what is good, because if we are saying that um, to look good is essentially, you have to be light skinned, or white, you have to be thin but curvy, you have to be, it's like all of these different sort of markers of what that looks like, then that's the problem.
Yeah. And this whole thing of like, when it came to um I don't know, companies like Dove including plus size women, like you said it in the book, and you're so right that it was a certain type of plus size woman which was celebrated. And even I was like, because I'm quite rectangular shaped, and I was like, oh, I really want that hourglass figure, and that's what plus size is. It's like nipped in at the waist, and then you go big at the thighs and all this, but obviously not everybody who's plus size looks like that, right?
No, no, I'm plus size. I don't look like that. Um, and yeah, it is, even within sort of inclusivity and, the place we're in now where there is a lot more inclusivity, and that is awesome. So we definitely, let's celebrate that. That's really good. But yeah, it is still selective, because there are still things controlling, that representation there. There is still beauty standards controlling that representation. And I think that that is probably the biggest thing. So yeah, for example, quite often with plus size models, or even the body positivity sort of community, the people that are most often celebrated are usually white. They're usually not that big. They're quite, particularly in body positivity, despite the fact that it was sort of started initially by queer and black women, women of color. It has become pretty white, and it has been commodified by like, fashion brands, etc., and beauty brands. And now the biggest, plus size influencers aren't necessarily that big. They could walk down the street and, nobody would say anything to them. They could sit in a plane seat and people wouldn't, wince or sort of like be like, oh God, they're going to take up loads of room. That's a very different existence to, being able to go to the high street and find clothes in your size. So, and that, that's not to take away from those people. Everyone has their issues. But yeah, I think we do have a problem with how inclusive inclusivity and diversity is.
I'm seeing a change recently, though. Some companies have put a really diverse range of models in their campaigns and stuff, and it's nice.
Yeah, that is really good. Yeah, it's always nice to see, those things happening. And yeah, I think it just, yeah, more would be good. And as I said, sort of like more of that inclusivity. I still think it's rare to see, for example, a dark skinned plus size woman.
Yeah.
I think I haven't really seen that. There was a TV show, actually, I can't remember the name of it, annoyingly. I need to write it down. But there was a TV show, I think it could have been on Channel 4 recently, where, the protagonist was a plus size dark skinned woman with like, I think it was someone who was like a white sort of man, and they were the romantic lead. And I was like, I have never seen that
Hmm.
on TV
Yeah.
before. I was like, this is really different. So yeah, things are starting to change, but
More.
these things should also be the norm. Like, it shouldn't
Yeah.
be like, oh my God, that's an amazing thing to happen. Like, we should stop. We shouldn't have to feel grateful for these little bits of inclusivity that we should
Mhm.
have had our entire lives.
Yeah, absolutely. Another thing you talk about in the book is beauty anxiety. So, what exactly is beauty anxiety?
Yeah, beauty anxiety. It is when, yeah, it's something that I know I've always had, and from people like readers I've spoken to over the years, etc. I know that other women have it, and I just wanted to give it a name, basically. But it is that feeling where we don't quite feel like we fit in, and that anxiety. Then it's yeah, it's quite hard to explain, but it's almost that anxiety behind um the reason that we sort of think a product is going to change our life. So, you see like a new face cream that launches that is going to get rid of discoloration, or it promises to do something amazing in 24 hours. And we put all of our hopes and dreams and, onto it. And that, that does cause anxiety because we think it's going to fix everything, and it doesn't. And when it doesn't, we're let down and we feel even worse. And yeah, I think there are lots of different kinds of beauty anxiety, but that is one particular one I think that
Mhm.
pertains to sort of products. But yeah, beauty anxiety I think is just, it's it's that feeling where we're not, we're sort of told that we're not okay as we are.
Yeah. I remember actually, putting on this face cream that was £100. I mean, my one of my friends for my birthday, she bought me, like, this sample size product just for me to try. I put it on when I went to bed, it was a night cream, and I expected to look like a different person in the morning. I was like, "Oh my god, this is worth £100. I'm putting it on my face, and when I wake up tomorrow morning, I'm gonna look like a different person." Obviously, I didn't. I still looked like myself with slightly softer skin, but I was like, "Oh my," I was like, "What?" Like, "Excuse me, I wasn't this is not what I was promised." It's crazy. It's,
Yeah.
you working in beauty though, and trying products, and being a brand consultant and that kind of thing, and then writing a book like this, like, how I'm just curious, how do you kind of manage that, both sides of that? Do you feel like
Yeah.
sometimes living in a cave and shunning it all and just letting your body hair grow and whatever? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, it is tricky. I think, the absolute version of that would be to renounce all beauty products, all beauty standards, etc., etc., and just like, yeah, live in a cave, exist without any kind of, like imposed beauty standard. But that just isn't the reality. It's not the reality for me. It's not the reality for most people. And so for me, as much as I think you know, that probably is the happiest approach, honestly, but it is not, it's not reality. And what I wanted to do was find a way for us to live within this society, live within, the beauty industry, live within the fashion industry, etc., and be able to navigate that on our own terms, and to just take ownership again of what we think beautiful is, and what, our own beauty standards basically. So that's where I come at things from. And I guess in terms of the other, my role, as a beauty journalist and also as a beauty brand consultant and whatnot, is to just come at things from integrity. If I don't believe in something, I generally won't,
Yeah.
I won't talk about it on my, my own social media or anything like that. Or, you know, um, if I'm working on brands, generally speaking, I'll only work with brands that I think either want to do better and will make a proper change throughout their whole structure. And generally that is why a brand would come to me. Or it's, a brand that is doing great stuff already and could be better, or, something I believe in. I probably wouldn't work with a brand that I thought was disempowering. I quite often flag things, it's interesting because I think if you, yeah, I guess as a professional in the industry, I do a lot of stuff behind the scenes that people maybe don't see. So I probably send at least 3 or 4 emails a week going, "Oh, that was problematic. This is what," it's not my job to do that, but I want to be part of making this a better, safer place for people.
Mm. Mhm. Um, you just, mentioned social media there, and I was just it just made me think about, like, how we use social media now and how it makes us feel about ourselves, and you did write about it in the book as well, and that whole thing of comparing ourselves to others. Now, how do you, manage that, and how would you kind of, like, encourage other people to manage that whole thing? Because it's quite bad now, the people that we see a lot more people, don't we? And it's quite easy to fall in that trap of comparing yourself.
Yeah, it's really easy to do that. Um, and so, yeah, I'll give you an example of something that happened to me, and this is when I really clocked how bad social media could be, and how it could affect us. Is, I think it was probably like, maybe like 8 years ago. It was when, or 8, 9 years ago, it was when social media like Instagram was really taking off, and um, Facetune was just, people were just starting to use Facetune, and just sort of starting to know about it. And um, I didn't actually really fully realize that. that you know, so I was following lots of people on Instagram and lots of models and celebrities and stuff for, you know, people I had to follow for work. And I kept looking at them and I was like, oh, they look so good. They look really amazing. And then another colleague said to me, oh, everyone uses Facetune, this app Facetune. And I was like, right, cool, okay. And then I tried it and I was like, oh my God. And I really started to, there was a real disconnect then between how I looked in the mirror and how this sort of idealized version of myself. And I'd never wanted any filler or any sort of treatments or anything like that, injectables before this point. And as soon as I started doing that, and I probably only did it for a few weeks, I went and had loads of like filler put in my face. And I didn't really, you know, I was 30, I didn't really need it. Nobody actually needs it. You know, that's a decision and it's a choice. That's another thing we need to get away from, thinking that we need to do these things. We don't. And it was just a real, you know, I could see that exactly what had happened. It was like this happened, then this happened, then this happened. It was a chain reaction.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was a real wake up call to me then, because you know it's fine to have those things, and that isn't, you know, I very like I don't want to. It's not my place to judge people. It's my, you know, what I want to do is to give them options. But yeah, what I really felt was that when that filler started to wear off, I started to really hate my face in a way that I hadn't in quite such a sort of extreme way before. It was really, really extreme. And I just thought I can't do this anymore. But what I did sort of see was that exactly how social media can really impact you and then the decisions you make after that. So I think for me, and one of the things I talk about in the book, is just reclaiming your feed and making it, you know, there are increasing studies coming out around social media and its effects on us, its effects on our self-esteem. And I think we just have to be able to police that for ourselves. So to really reclaim your feed. And one thing that really made a huge difference to me, and I probably did this maybe just after this period, was that I started to follow plus loads and loads of plus size and body positivity influencers who were sort of my size or bigger. And what that really showed me was, well, number one, it had a really big effect on how I saw myself. And number two, it just felt like every time I was looking at my feed, I wasn't beating myself up. I wasn't following all the Fitspo people that I was following before, etc. And I think it can be a really good way to almost normalize something that you are struggling with, something that has made you feel ugly. If you fill your feed with that, with people who are embracing it, with people who don't hate themselves because of it, it's so empowering. And I actually think it's one of the greatest ways that we can almost like turn down the dial on all that self-loathing and yeah, just sort of gradually start to love ourselves a little bit more.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, the power of social media is crazy, right? But I like the way that you're saying to turn it into something positive that's going to make you feel better about yourself. I mean, you talked about that experience, and that was, you know, like you said, about 8 years ago, and now filters are very normal, and you know, everybody has them on, and it is, and I know a lot of people that are close to me, my family even, who they hate their own face without a filter, like, in terms of a photo. If it hasn't got a filter on, they don't like it. "Oh, no, I don't." It's like, "That's your face, be okay with it, you look amazing," you're right? So it's gotten worse, um,
Yeah.
and that, I think that that probably is a very common thing that you have described, you know, that chain reaction, looking at yourself in a filter or other people or whatever, and then leading up to the treatments. I think it's probably more common, and that's why there's a lot of people who look very similar nowadays, I think, probably. Which
Yeah, definitely. There is a very sort of, I guess, quite a homogenized look. But yeah, I think yeah, we do have to be really careful to, and you know, I don't want to, I know it's really easy to use filters. I know it's really tempting. I know it's also really hard when you see what you look like and then you see what everyone else on social media looks like and they've all used the filters. So you're like, well, why don't I? But I think that's where you have to go. You have to take all the, you know, reclaim your autonomy and go, do I want to feel like this
yeah.
for the rest of my life? Do I want, you know, this is actively making me feel worse. Can I take the hit and not use the filters for a little bit and sort of readjust to how I look and, you know, follow people who maybe don't use filters, follow people who embrace their natural, you know, as I sort of said, if it's something you're struggling with to sort of post without filters, just completely change your feed up. Follow people who don't use them.
Mm,
Follow people who embrace how they look and, you
yeah.
know, supposed imperfections. because it does make a huge difference. And once you see that, your brain starts to go, okay, that's normal, that's normal, that's normal, and it just starts to sort of almost reset a bit.
Yeah, and also, I don't know if you've noticed, but this whole thing of celebrating yourself and feeling normal, like even posting a picture up of yourself and where, maybe you've got, I don't know, your flab roll showing at the back or something like that, and not having to be like, flab rolls are okay. It's okay if it's like just it's okay. You don't have to explain away everything, I don't think. That's my personal view anyway. It's like
Mm.
you don't have to explain away, oh, I have a slight bulge in my stomach because I like food. Like you don't have to. I think it's just like be normal and be happy and put yourself out there, you know, and the pictures will speak. And if you know what I mean? It's kind of like I think just be proud of yourself. I don't feel like there has to be a disclaimer about why you're plus sized or not, very thin or whatever. What do you think about it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, it's fine if you want to do that, but I would almost think about who you think you're posting for. I think
Mm,
that can sometimes be interesting if we think, and it's not even just posting. It's almost like, with dressing and makeup as well. Who are you doing that for? I think what's quite interesting is that there is a real rhetoric, and there has been for the last, 4 or 5 years, where it's like, I'm doing it for me, I'm empowered, etc., etc. Often that's, that can be true. That's cool. Um, but I just think invariably we are doing it to sort of almost pander to like a sort of like, it's almost like an invisible force that we don't necessarily know that we're being controlled by, or that we're sort of posting, or like getting dressed for, or like putting on makeup for. And so often that is the sort of heterosex, it is the male gaze. And it's so tricky, because even though we think we're doing these empowering things, there is this long lineage and history where that has created everything about, everything from the way we dress to, like our makeup, that whole everything about us aesthetically is the result of a lineage of like centuries and centuries worth of, really complex, interesting, different things. And lots of oppression. And I just, we can't discount that, because that all sort of leads up to
yeah.
what we're doing right now. It's very hard to distance ourselves and sort of sit there and go, I'm doing this for me. It's really, really hard to do that. And I think that's where, when we are posting things, when we are getting ready, let's just tune in a little bit and notice why we're posting, what we're saying to ourselves, what we're correcting, what we're filtering, why are we doing that. I think starting to have a little bit more inquiry with ourselves around those things
Mhm.
can really help pinpoint any
Yeah.
issues we might have, or just help us shift a little bit.
Yeah, because it is deep, it is deep and you do have to look inwards as well. And also like I think it's quite nice to have a break from everything that you're seeing and social media and everything and just the people that you're around because like for instance like I went on a family holiday recently and it was to Ghana and that's where it's my husband's mother country and like for me like to go there and take my kids there and for them to see, for example, that 90% of the women there have got curves, natural curves that people pay for in this country and have just become in fashion here. Whereas that they're naturally built like that. And it's like, I've had discussions with my kids like, oh, my friends are so thin and this and that. And, I've got like big thighs or whatever, and so that was actually a very empowering thing for them to take them there where it's like, well, this is actually your um, these are where your genes come from. Some of them, this is normal. This is celebrated. You don't have to be a size 6 to wear what you want, to wear fitted clothes and whatever. And it was really nice. And I feel like you don't get that sometimes. You know what I mean? You're in your own little bubble, and you don't really think about that kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, that's really great and really empowering. And interestingly, I think they can also, within certain communities, I know there's almost the opposite issue, where if you're not curvy enough, it's
Yeah,
like, you have to like, I don't know, eat more to put on weight, or like,
do
there's a pressure on
something.
the other
Yeah,
side as
yeah,
well.
yeah. I
There's it can, I think it's more rare, but I think it can go the other way too. So
know.
yeah, I
I
mean,
felt it myself, Anita. When I went, I was like, "Oh my god, like I need to get some curves." Like honestly, like I felt it myself. So yeah, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about aging, um, because like aging as a woman, it's something which you've written about. It's something which I'm thinking about now as well. Like how do you really feel, honestly, about
Mm.
aging and your looks changing? Are you okay with it?
It's really, really hard. I'm definitely sort of starting that journey now where, I've got like grey hairs and my skin is starting to change a little bit, and it's really hard. I have no judgment for anyone who is freaking out about it because it's really hard. I think what annoys me is that it shouldn't be hard, and it annoys me that it's not as hard for men. And I think we have to remember that because on a fundamental level, men are just not judged in the same way that we are. And this is why I wrote the chapter on aging, and it was probably the hardest one to write. Is It's because it is something that it feels so entrenched in society that your worth and your beauty diminishes as you get older. But that isn't truth. That's a construct. That is a social construct, and I explain why that's happened in the book, and I sort of unpick that. And I do think we have to, you know the things that make me really angry are that, yeah, it doesn't happen to men, or that we are sold this like half life in some ways, in that we don't ever, we never get to really be happy with the way that we look. You get all this insecurity about, like being a certain size or looking like whatever until a certain point, and then after that point, you're then told that you're old and you're no longer of value or attractive to society, and then you start to hate the way you look. It's just like, when do we get to be ourselves and be happy? It's
Yeah.
so, so awful. I think with, like, women in particular, I think we just sold such a raw deal, which is why, again, I think we need to try and, like, almost just before all of that sort of aging stuff, and we're told that, you have this, you've hit 30, it's Botox time, or like, which is such a, it's become this weird rite of passage.
It has.
We have, yeah, it definitely has. I noticed it. My friends started to talk about it around that age. We need to go, okay, cool, how do I want to do this? And you can change your mind and stuff, and that's totally cool, but it's okay, how do I want to age? And can I do things to make me feel better about it? So, for example, one thing that's been really popular on my social media, on Instagram, has I've sort of created a highlight of like amazing older women who are like almost like redefining what it is to become older. They might be musicians, or they might just dress in a really cool way, or like, I think, like, the more we see people like that, the less it takes the sort of, I think it just takes the edge off that sort of, that change, I guess, and how we're viewed by society, and essentially the male gaze. And I I think that can really help. And yeah, I guess personally for me, just to go back to your question, sorry, I've gone around the houses. Um, yeah, I do struggle with it, and it's hard. And some days, yeah, I am just like, oh my God, I look really old. And then I have to stop myself and go, do you though? Are you just really knackered? Is that actually what's happening here? Do you just need a bit more sleep? Is it this? Is it that? And then you have to catch those thoughts, and I know it's hard work, but you do have to try and deconstruct them in your mind. And
Yeah.
over time, they do become a little less powerful, but it is really, really hard, especially when everything around you is telling you on social media, on TV, etc. There is one way to be beautiful, and that is young.
Yeah. I mean, I'm on this WhatsApp group with some friends, quite a lot of women actually who are all similar ages to me, and everyone, the whole thing is about recommending beauty products, and I think I'm at the point where I'm like, I don't know what we're all looking for, because we keep recommending things and trying to buy things, and like I'm a bit like overwhelmed with it all. I'm a bit like, what are we trying to do here? Like, what are we like? What's the goal? To rewind the time, or to freeze time, or something? Like, it's at the point where I'm like, I can't be bothered with it anymore, to be honest. And like you know, I'm not gonna lie, I do struggle a little bit now with the aging, and I didn't think I would actually, but I've noticed that I've recently started kind of looking my age a little bit, and I'm somebody who got away with looking quite a bit younger for a long time. So I think that I looked 25 for years and years and years, right? So I looked 25 up until I was 35. And I was like, when you get used to people going, "Oh my God, you look so young." And you think, and then when someone guesses your real age, you're like, "Oh my God, how dare you?" You know, and it's, which is stupid, because it's like, that's your real age. Like, be okay with it. And so now I feel like, I don't know, something happened like after I had my third kid, and I think the something is probably just called life and getting older, you know, whereas I started to look a bit more like my age, and being okay with that, being okay with people not saying, "Oh, well, you're not 25." That is something that I'm getting used to, and seeing things like, you know, little lines and open pores and all these kind of, I never had to think about before. So it's like, oh, you know, and you don't, it's not naturally like you, as in like, well, however you confident you may be, I think it is going to be a bit difficult. Like you do notice things and you're like, okay, what's happening here? Like, you know, and like you said, with people around you talking about Botox, talking about miracle creams, you do think yourself, like, do I need this? You know?
Yeah, it is really tricky. Um, yeah, I think this is why we have to sort of like think about it for ourselves and just, it's I think it's almost the decisions that when we do these things, fueled by that beauty anxiety to go, oh God, I need to do
Mm.
something. It's that quick fix, like what can I do? Instead of sort of sitting with it for a little while, then we do make decisions that we sometimes get stuck in. And one of the things I sort of talk about in the book in terms of, particularly with injectables and cosmetic surgery, it doesn't always end. And with injectables, like once you have, as I sort of spoke about earlier, when they wear off, that's quite hard to deal with. Nobody ever talks about that. You know, it's not, there are no sort of in-depth psychoanalysis before you go and have injectables or anything like that. So you do have to remind yourself, I might be locked into this realistically for the rest of my life, maybe, or until I decide I don't want to, whenever. But they aren't, I just don't think they're quick fixes and they're quick decisions. We need to like think about how they play out for us, and whether we do want to spend the time getting those things done. Do we want to spend all that money on what could end up being like hundreds, like thousands and thousands of pounds?
Yeah.
Do we want to spend it on that? Is there something we'd actually rather spend that on? And it does come down to those decisions, and it's that term beauty work, which is something that was coined in the beauty myth. It is this invisible job that we have on top of being mothers, or being siblings, or being like
Mhm.
daughters, or everything, all the roles that women play in life, bosses, etc. um you know it's like an invisible job on top of that, and it's like, how much of that extra work do I want to do? And that's the choice we have to make, but we have to make that choice and not just let everything around us define it, and etc. And it's fine to use anti-aging creams, it's fine to but you've got to know that you know they'll help a little bit, they'll moisturize, there might be some good ingredients in there, and that's cool. Some are better than the others, definitely, but they are not going to fundamentally change what is essentially a really natural process.
Yeah. And that's the thing. That is a really important and obvious point that you've made. A natural process of getting older. And it's like, I think for me, like, you know, when I've accepted, okay, you know what, you are gonna change, your face is gonna change because you're getting older. I'm 44. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm not gonna look 24 forever, am I? And to be okay with that. So so yeah, that whole, yeah, that the changing of mindset, definitely 100%. Um you know, I was just thinking that like things that women say to each other, I feel is more important than even what men say to each other. And it can have a bigger impact on your self-esteem and how, and the way that you think about yourself. Like, do you think women do that enough to each other, like build each other up? And can it help this whole toxic beauty standards?
um I think it can be really tricky. I think, yeah, sometimes it's obviously amazing if you've got someone going, you look great as you are, and you can really take that on. But I don't know, sometimes I think the anxiety can rub off on each other with women. And I've definitely seen that within like groups of my friends, and I've got some really like big groups of female friends, and there is definitely like, if one person does one thing, then it feels like all the rest of the group sort of start to follow. And I think, we almost set our own beauty standards within things. So I think, or even not even just that, it could be anything. It could be like, you know, everything from like, having children to, getting a big house, or like, whatever it happens to be.
Mm.
So I think that's why we do have to like have that sense of autonomy over it, where we are going, okay, I'm not going to let those things influence me. Or if they're good, I am going to let them influence me, and, lean into that more, and to just, have not, it's not a wall, it's just almost like, you know, like a sieve, just being like, okay, I'm going to let that through, I'm not going to let that through, and just sort of like limit those, you know, the forces if they are a bit negative. Or, you know, if you are in a group of friends and everything is about like anti-aging creams, or I'm going to have this cosmetic surgery, and you know, I've got a couple of friends who are like that, and I find it quite wearing, if I'm honest, because I'm, yeah, I'm like, it feels disempowering to hear that for me, but I also feel sad that you feel like that, and sometimes that's exhausting, actually, if I'm honest. And I think then you have to just sort of limit things a little bit and sort of just be able to be like, okay, do you know what? And maybe I can't spend loads and loads of time with this person, and that sucks, but you know, maybe that's the case. Um, and just, yeah, just almost sort of just watch where those things are coming from, because I do think, yeah, we obviously, you know, we know, even though social media is a huge thing, you know, reality TV I think is another big influencing factor that can affect how we think about ourselves and what's normal, and etc etc. But yeah, our friends and our family have huge influence as well.
Mm. I mean, I remember when I went shopping with my sister-in-law once, and I picked something up and I was like, "Oh, I don't know if I'm going to fit into this because it's a size 10, and don't know if I'm in between a size 10 or 12, or I put on weight or something." And she she actually said to me, she went, all fully grown adults should be a size 14 at least. And it's like, obviously that statement is not true. And that's problematic for some people. But you know, at that moment when you kind of need to like that, you're just like, you know what? I'm a full size adult. I'm a full grown adult. I don't need to be squeezing myself and starving to get into size 10s. Thank you, sis. Do you know what I mean? At that
Yeah,
time, you need to hear this because it's like, well, yes, it's okay.
yeah, and also like it is. I know there is a real attachment, and I think a lot of women, you know, I think this is slightly better for the younger generation, sort of Gen Z, but I think millennials and upwards, there is such a strong attachment to sort of like, you know, being a perfect size 10, and like that stupid phrase, like it's so ridiculous.
Yeah.
Um, and especially, you know, layered on top of it, that being a stupid phrase, is that um you know, the dress sizes vary so hugely. And as somebody who works in this industry, they vary from batch to batch. So that's not only do they vary from, you know, like H&M to Zara, it varies from literally each batch of where each batch of clothing is made, because they're made, sometimes they're made in different countries, each single batch. It might just be like a plain black t-shirt from Zara. It could be made in two different places. It can be made in two different factories. There is so much variation that you cannot base and outsource your self-esteem to that,
Mm,
because it's so changeable. You just can't. And this is the thing with beauty standards, we can't outsource our self-esteem to them because they change so often.
yeah.
And you know, even in within my lifetime, so I'm in my late 30s now, but even within my lifetime there have been so many shifts in like, you know, body, you know, what the perfect body is. And we can't, you have to take control of that and have a sense of your own self and your own beauty and the way that you look, because that is always going to change. And if you don't, and I think so many of us have lived through this, is that there is so much misery to being, having, thinking you have to fit into each whim as it changes and each trend as it changes. So we do have to like hold on to ourselves.
Yes, absolutely. And you know, I've been there myself, Anita. Like, you know, I've been there when Kate Moss and that kind of super skinny, very gaunt look was in. I was not that. And now I'm here when the, you know, voluptuous Kim Kardashian curves are in, and I'm not that either. So it's like I'm at that place, like I told you my age. I'm at that place where I'm like, I don't need to be feeling like that, looking at other people. I'm gonna, you know, I'm sorry, but I'm an adult and I'm not gonna do that anymore. But it is like you said, you have to be quite strong and clued up to do that, right?
Yeah, you do, and it is really hard, I think. Yeah, particularly when you are tired and you've got a lot on, it's really hard to keep those influences out. I think that is when it can really get to us, when we're not feeling mentally resilient enough, or
Yeah.
you know, our self-care is not great, or you know, for whatever reason we just got a lot on. That is when those things can kind of seep in and get to us.
Mm,
And I think that is really tricky. One thing I just wanted to touch on as well, I think you mentioned this earlier and I kept forgetting to say it, but I think quite often one of the things that really affects us is that sense of, when we are getting older in particular, is that it's what that age means or has come to mean. So as someone who is approaching 40, that it feels very overwhelming in a way that I don't think it does for necessarily for men, and it feels like a real passing of time and a loss of youth, and like all of this stuff is really tied up with it. And yeah, I think, I definitely have a sense of that, and I don't want to feel like that. And I've been trying to think about why I feel like that, and why so many of us, as I think, particularly as you get into your sort of late 30s and 40s, I think quite often it is like, we are forced into these more adult roles in life, and we have lots of responsibilities, and things do sometimes become a bit monotonous, etc., etc. You are sometimes in this sort of slightly, like, you're in a more grown up life. And I think quite often the thing that happens is that we then start to feel old because of, we're not necessarily, well, we are in these slightly more adult lives, but we're not necessarily having so much fun as we should. And I know that sounds like a really basic thing to say, but I think that is a huge, huge part in that the things that we loved about, being, younger disappear. And so often I think we turn that sadness on ourselves and on our looks, and it becomes like, oh, I look really old, I look really tired, I look like this, I feel old. And actually, yeah, of course, there's been some biological aging, of course. But I think a huge part of it is a loss of the youthful things that we've enjoyed. And I talk about this in the book. It's like, how can you reclaim those things? You know, do you feel old? Or do you just want to go out more and see your friends more? Do you want to go see some bands? Do you want to, do you want to, I don't know, go traveling? Do you want to do all of these things that you used to do? Can you reclaim some of those things in your life before you start turning to things to make you feel less old? Because it isn't just a biological, it isn't just that biological factor. There is like a mental factor. And I think that loss of the things we enjoy is a really big part of it. And we can do that for beauty too. Like, if you, I don't know, if you were like a naughty emo kid and you loved, like, the black eyeliner and the fringe or whatever it was, can you reclaim some of that through your makeup? It doesn't have to be necessarily boring now that you're in your 40s, 50s, 60s, etc. It can be what you want it to be, and you can redefine that. So can you lean back into that younger version of yourself in some way without like having to literally turn the clock back with injectables or cosmetic surgery or whatever it happens to be?
And don't you think, Anita, that people that you meet in life who are like older than me and you, and they are constantly willing to have adventures and to learn and to have those good times and create those moments, that there's something about them. Obviously, they might look older because they are older, but don't you think there's something about them that is really still quite vibrant and youthful?
Yeah, absolutely. This is why everyone is obsessed with like Iris Apfel, or whoever it happens to be.
Yeah.
These older women that are really incredible. It's because they are really inspiring, and they are the people that almost like the beacons that show us that we can be different, we can be ourselves, we can be whatever we want to be. We don't have to let age define us. Iris Apfel is what, like, I can't know how old she is, 90s, hundreds, and like, is like coming out with fashion ranges and stuff. And I just think, yeah, we don't have to let age define us in that way. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's very
100%.
interesting.
100%. And you know what? It's been so nice talking to you. And I feel like, there's obviously so much more we could talk about because it's a very deep subject. Um, but just remind people like where they can get your book. Is it out in paperback now?
It's not, no. So it's out in hardback, and you can get it from Amazon, you can get it from Foyles, you can get it from Waterstones, independent bookshops as well. You can, if you want to go to an independent bookshops, ask for it, and they will hopefully have it or order it in. It's on Audible as well, if you would like to listen to me reading it. So yeah, there's lots of different places. And yeah, if you have anything you want to say or any questions, you can find me on Instagram at It's Me Anita B.
Lovely. And you're everywhere anyway, aren't you? Because, that you do a lot of columns, beauty, other things as well. So,
Yeah, a column in the Guardian Saturday magazine, and lots of stuff for Condé Nast Traveller as well.
lovely. Well, Anita, you are absolutely smashing it with this book, with your column. And yeah, thanks so much for coming on, and thank you for listening as well. Please do make sure that you follow this podcast, that you subscribed. Like I feel like a lot more of you are listening, and it's really nice, and people are sharing this. So please keep doing that, and thank you for tuning in. Until next week, peace out, Bernay. Bye.
Hi.